The last panel, last but not least. And yeah, so this is a panel about the Balkans, the Balkan borders and European borders. By the way, Balkans represent a part of the Europe, of course. Although if you remember, one of the German or Austrian politicians mentioned something, I think it was the Chancellor Metternich who mentioned something like the Europe ends at the Wilhelmstrasse in Vienna. I do not agree with him. So talking about the Balkans sometimes is talking about the other Europe, something different, but I would say it's not that much different. It's not that much different. And to me, at least to me. And talking about the Balkans, it's also talking about the region which is divided by so many borders. So many borders. I mean, talking about the geography of the region, like a lot of mountains, rivers, and the borders which separate states, but also internal borders. Talking about Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, we're talking about the internal borders as well. And in the end, the mental borders. The region is highly divided between so many different historical narratives, different opinions about so many things. And we don't have time to discuss all of this. Which would be very interesting to continue. But let me focus about general issues, and we will talk about general issues today. And let me introduce our noble panelists here. And so, Professor Dr. Vladimir Mitev, he is the professor from the Faculty of Social Sciences, Public International Business College, Mitrovica, Kosovo. He's also the founder and director of the Kosovo International Summer Academy. I think I could say that all his professional activity is focused on building the bridges between societies, and we'll continue this discussion later. The second panelist is Mr. Vladimir Mitev from Bulgaria. He's a Bulgarian journalist. He's expert on the Bulgarian-Romanian relations, also expert about the Middle East and Iran, and he is the founder of the blog The Bridge of Friendship. The second one, the Persian Bridge of Friendship, and he's also the co-host of the podcast about international relations. The name of the podcast is the Border Talks. And you're welcome, Vladimir.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. And the last panelist is Dr. Spasimir Domaravsky. He's the lecturer at the Faculty of Political Science and International Studies at Warsaw University, but also a senior analyst at our Institute of Central Europe. I'm happy to have you here. You are welcome, all of you. And my name is Konrad Pawłowski. I'm a head of the Balkan department at the Institute of Central Europe and as well academic at the Marii Skłodowska University. And let me start because I have already presented some general thoughts about the Balkans, but let me start with the questions about the physical borders. I mean the true administrative borders between the states in the region. So first I would like to ask Vladimir Mitev about the border between Romania and Bulgaria, because I always, during discussion with my students, I always said that there was only one bridge between Bulgaria and Romania as the exemplification of some problematic relations between two states, but it's not only problematic in the context of communication or transportation, it's much more, I would say. That's why, Vladimir, would you like to explain the specificity of this border, please?
Thank you. Indeed, Bulgaria and Romania have a thick border. The Danube forms some 470 kilometers from it, and then they have until 609 land border. But in any case, it's a border which is relatively difficult to pass. As you mentioned, there is one bridge. In fact, there are two bridges, but the bridge building process is somehow difficult in both physical and I would say also interhuman or societal terms. I even have there are many ways in which you can go and find some difficulties in these relations, and I like to emphasize them because it's not normal thing for that to exist. And I even need to say that Polish people have been with which I have communicated are a rare occasion of a nation which spots that there is something unnatural or strange in this distance which they have observed between Bulgarians and Romanians. I can give example, for example, of Andrzej Staszuk, who was some 10 years ago speaking at the Polish Institute in Sofia, and in his books, travel log books, and also in his presentations, he notices this distance, and he was asking what's the reason, and he didn't have a good answer. And I can also give you example of some foreign policy experts with which I have spoken from the Center for Central Institute for Central Europe or the other major institute, OCV. In any case, Bulgaria and Romania, for some reason, have had difficulty, for example, to settle their border on the river Danube. You know that there is always some move of the islands in one or the other direction, new islands appear, etc. So there are some quarters of square meters length which periodically move either to the Bulgarian or to the Romanian zone of the border. And I'm not sure whether you're aware of this fact, but the last time Bulgaria and Romania agreed on their Danube border was in 1908, more than some 115 years ago. The agreement included that every 10 years the governments of the two countries would gather and renew the border, which meant that some islands would go to the Bulgarian side, some other islands to the Romanian side, etc. But in reality, they have met many meetings over this period, and they never had the. It's difficult exactly to say exactly what was missing, but basically they never agreed. And my thesis is that this difficulty to establish common ground or to make concessions is related maybe to certain aspects of the peripheral, the fact that they're more on the periphery, meaning that there is some hegemony or culture of hegemony, and if you surrender some square meters of uninhabited land to your neighbor, which might be seen in hegemonic terms as a competitor or enemy, that is already some kind of treason and you can be attacked. So in any case, for 115 years there has been no further agreement, and there are issues which appear as a result of that. There are cases when Bulgarians go to an island which is considered Bulgarian and are arrested by Romanian police, or there are opposed. Even this October there was a case in which a Romanian family, basically a father and a child and a son, tried to gather some wood from an island which is considered Bulgarian, but it is really so close to Romania that you can go even with a cart, and there is no problem to pass the waters. And there was, in fact, kind of casualty in this situation because some events unfolded which led to the situation in which one of the men was shot at. So there are even that might sound, if I was thinking, if we think in Cold War terms, maybe such things can be justified, just as we were speaking about securitizations of borders. But in the case of Bulgaria, it's different, and Romania is different because we are in the EU, we are in NATO. It's not this Cold War era between the countries anymore. And I guess the reason for such experiences to continue is related to inertia in the relations. You wanted me to speak only about the border, or I could expand some more about the relations?
So maybe it would be the second part of our discussion.
Okay, so I'll have some more observations on border if you don't mind.
Yes.
About the bridges, also another example. In fact, bridges between Bulgaria and Romania are built only when there is international pressure for that. I mean, of course, countries again can negotiate from the very moment Bulgarian modern state was reestablished in 1878. There have been ambitions and followed some discussions about bridging towards Romania, and yet the achievement of an agreement seems to be very, very complex process with a lot of details and a lot of difficulty for negotiation teams and experts. And as a result of that, the first bridge on the Danube between Bulgaria and Romania was built in 1954, and it started being built in 1952. And you may be aware of the fact that in 1952, Greece and Turkey joined NATO. So in fact, it was a bridge meant to serve certain strategic purposes during the Cold War for the Eastern Bloc. And of course, it was built with support from Soviet Union and other countries in the Eastern Bloc. But it was the international, if I could say, imperative which led to this bloc. It was not the dynamism and the desire of the two countries and their ability to cooperate. And in the case of the second bridge, which is the first one is at Ruse-Giurgiu, and the second bridge is at Vidin-Calafat. There, the Austrian, and maybe we could say the European Union role is important, given that there was war in Yugoslavia in the 90s, and that led to the process of taking decisions, giving money, etc. But see, the agreement for this bridge was signed in the year 2000, and it was completed in 2013. So you can again get an idea that even when there is international support and a number of obstacles are resolved, change happens slowly. And if I have to end the talk on the borders, you may ask, okay, Danube is a river border, maybe it's difficult to trespass. What about the land border? I'll maybe speak later about the borders of experience or between people, not really so much borders in physical terms, but borders inside us. In the case of Dobruja, perhaps you are aware that Dobruja was through the 20th century a contested region between Romania and Bulgaria. It's the Dobrujan question ended with the Craiova Treaty of September 1940, which led to the partition of Dobruja. So southern Dobruja is now in Bulgaria, northern Dobruja is in Romania, and the treaty was related to population exchange, which meant that Bulgarians from northern Dobruja were moved to southern Dobruja, and people to which in Bulgaria we refer as colonialists, people who Romania settled in the land when it acquired it after 1913, were sent to northern Dobruja. The thing is that, at least my own experience is that the attitude on both sides, southern and northern Dobruja, towards the other nation evolve slower than the other parts of the countries evolve. Of course, if somebody is well aware of these relations, can also give experience. We have other experience, people with experience from the region too. But my own experience is that in Tutrakan, for example, which is one of the towns of southern Dobruja, there is a lot of emphasis on the Bulgarian resistance to Romanian rule in the land, and in Balchik, there is somehow, if people identify you as Romanian speaker, they may have some distrust. So there is this feeling that in a way the fight for Dobruja, in a way, maybe a little bit or more continuous. And on the other hand, in northern Dobruja, there are associations of people who have been somehow living to the south. And as far as I'm aware, they also remain somehow skeptical towards Bulgarian. So this issue, even if officially states don't put it, if we focus on the level of people, we may get different attitudes. Of course, we can have Romanian speakers in Bulgarian part of Dobruja. We can have people who are having good attitude for Bulgarians in the Romanian part. But I think it's important that also segments of population in a way still live this fight, even if so many years have passed. So this is my small entrance into the issue of borders. I can speak later how the border evolved, because there is certain evolution even starting from socialist times and after entering the EU and after the war in Ukraine. It's a curious situation. All the speakers were having some feeling of worry about the war in Ukraine. War in Ukraine is maybe the best thing which happened to the Bulgarian-Romanian relations. I know maybe it sounds cynical, but it is true that it is the war in Ukraine which put a certain catalyst to the Bulgarian-Romanian relations and helped the countries overcome their traditional inertia, at least in political relations. So if there is occasion for that, I could speak more about how the border evolved and also about how the inertia in a way still continues. At some level it's overcome, but I can speak maybe why at some level it's overcome and why at some it doesn't.
I'm afraid that we don't have that much time, to be honest, and we have to speed up a little bit. So, thank you very much indeed. So we heard that we still have some kind of hard borders between. I mean, we had the hard borders in the region, and not only between the Western Balkan countries, but also it relates also to the Romania and Bulgaria, unfortunately, to some extent. And so then I would like to ask next question to Dr. Legnut Haidari, because you come from Kosovo, and there's a lot of discussion about the borders when we think about the Kosovo. So the question is about how Kosovo functions at the international level. I mean, my question relates to the border crossings of Kosovo. Would you like to explain us? Because I think to many people it's still quite new topic, I would say, in that way. So, Levion, the floor is yours, please.
Can I get your mic? Not working. Okay. Thank you for having me here. As a PhD from Poland, it's always a great pleasure to be back at my second home, let's say. Well, although the Western Balkans is the last panel, not less important when it comes to geopolitical developments, particularly after the invasion of Russian invasion of Ukraine. EU Western Balkan border security challenges are very complex, driven by different geopolitical and socioeconomic, also on the security developments as well. The region history from the conflicts from 1990 to 1991 and the issues like migration and the organized crime as well and terrorism continues to be one of the main challenges for the Western Balkans. Kosovo joined the Western world in terms of imposing sanctions against Russia. Although Ukraine remains one of the countries that did not recognize Kosovo yet, being the victim of genocide that happened in former Yugoslavia, Kosovo showed the empathy towards Ukraine. This is very important to mention. The security challenges remains to be one of the main, let's say, concerns, particularly to Kosovo, considering that all the first neighbors in the north of Kosovo are Russia proxy, in this regard, unfortunately, Serbia, which remains the closest allies in Western Balkan, but in Europe as well, with Russia. Last year, even the awareness of the Kosovo institutions tried to aware the international community before, especially since the invasion of Ukraine, the consequences about the potential conflict in the Western Balkans, aiming to open the new conflicts in the Western Balkan with the aim to shift the attention from the war in Ukraine to the international community to another conflicts in the Western Balkans. And that almost happened. Last year we had a scenario to repeat the Crimea in North Kosovo, where 100 uninformed, heavy military equipped individuals entered Kosovo illegally, of course, through Serbia borders, and they attacked Kosovo institutions. And the aim was to repeat another Crimea, which fortunately didn't happen. It was prevented, first because of NATO present in Kosovo, and the second, the Kosovo authorities as well. Migration also remains another challenge as well. Although it was mentioned that Western Balkans is just a transit route for migrants, still this lack of cooperation especially between the Kosovo and Serbia remains one of the challenges to arrange all what was mentioned, this cross-border management as well. In terms of Russia, as I said, it's still a concern for Kosovo institutions. It's still a main, in fact, concern for Kosovars. Their narrative is still present. Before the invasion of Ukraine, in almost in every press release of Kremlin, Lavrov and Putin as well, the Kosovo case was their narrative, their discourse. So they wanted to portray international community as a failure in terms of bringing democracy in the Western Balkans, which as a Kosovars, as a Kosovo Albanians, who happen to be a victim of a genocide, I can tell personally how excited I am about this success story of the Kosovo and the involvement of international community. And I believe this is what the international community should continue to do with Ukraine as well. Of course, another element is the weak of rule of law in general in the Western Balkans as well. Corruption and inefficiency of within the border control agencies as well. This hinders the effectiveness of the security measures in the Western Balkan. The dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina is crucial. And this, I believe, the dialogue that started, in fact, 12 years ago as a technical dialogue, then in turn to be a political dialogue. It is important, especially for European Union, to become more proactive in order to find a solution and bring a long-lasting peace in the Western Balkans. It is, of course, we will mention maybe later on, but another important element is the acceleration of Euro-Atlantic integration of Western Balkans as a whole. Three countries that remains to be outside of NATO in this regard are Kosovo, Serbia, and Bosnia, particularly because of the Republika Srpska. While Kosovo is, of course, willingness to join NATO, the rest of the countries are still, playing with both cards when it comes to European values, and Western values, and Russia's friendship as well. So what are just to mention that the one of the main challenges of borders controls in terms of migrations and terrorists as well, considering that especially like 5-6 years ago, we had the foreign fighters who returned to Western Balkans. So it was impossible, let's say, to control effectively the borders in Western Balkans, considering the landscape, the difficulties, and the lack of infrastructures that Western Balkans countries had in the border to remain, let's say, to control the borders effectively. Some of the challenges that needs to be addressed in this regard with the proactive role of European Union, but also United States as well, is to strengthen border management and law enforcement capacities through the EU-funded, of course, programs, to improve cross-border cooperation to fight organized crime and human trafficking, to promote, which is the main one, regional stability through political dialogue, especially between Kosovo and the Serbia. Just yesterday we had an agreement with North Macedonia in terms of cross-border management, as it is known, one-stop shop. So basically that means both countries will cooperate in two of the main borders between Kosovo and North Macedonia, and supporting Euro-Atlantic integration or accelerating the EU integration. Euro-Atlantic integration remains one of the the most important, let's say, needs to ensure the peace and stability in the Western Balkans.
Thank you very much. You mentioned a lot of issues connected directly with the Russian aggression over Ukraine, so thank you for that as well. And the next question is about personal experience. I would like to ask Dr. Spasomir Domaracki about his experience, because Spasomir is crossing all those borders from the Balkans to the Central Europe for his whole life, actually. And so, can you tell us how the system, like the border control system, whatever, your personal experience connected with the borders, how it has changed through the years? Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. No, I'm not going to say that. This is something that sometimes I prefer not to remember. But I would start from somewhere else, and I hope that I will end where you expected me to be. First and foremost, just to follow up on Vladimir's intervention, we talk about two countries, members of the European Union and NATO, that are connected on the river only with two bridges. And it's literally an extremely funny exercise to try to follow the political debates in both countries about the perspective of another bridge, which very clearly shows how both internal politics and geopolitical considerations, purely business interests, determine the fact that next bridges cannot appear. So we need to be aware that in geopolitical terms, the road through Bulgaria and Romania is the shortest land road from the Middle East to Europe, and it is used in the context of EU-Turkey relations for very intensive exchange within the customs union. And in that respect, if you look at the infrastructural challenges, it is fascinating how even in the context of the support of external factors, first the Soviet Union and now the European Union, these two countries were only able to build only two bridges. So this is a very interesting example of how local animosities and interests still continue to shape the relationship. I think it is worth later on to return to this argument about the periphery. But now what I wanted to say, and I think that probably we all deserve this brief introduction into the context of the Balkans. We have the tendency to divide them into Eastern and Western, which is into a huge extent a very artificial division, usually following significant historical events. But we need to be aware that the Balkans is a territory, first of all, of overlapping empires experience, and secondly, very strongly impacted by the Cold War. I think that the Cold War experience is an absolute phenomenon. If Europe was divided into East and West, then the Balkans was divided into three parts. And that made it much more interesting, dense, and full of various types of paradoxes. We need to remember that whereas the East and the West were indeed meeting in the Balkans on the border between Bulgaria and Greece and Turkey, then Yugoslavia was remaining this kind of an awkward player in between that was neither a West nor an East, with an army prepared to resist oppression both from the West and from the East, at the same time representing Eastern ideology financed with Western money. So that was really a perfect solution if you think for economic development, and a source of enormous nostalgia from today's perspective. On the other hand, these borders very strongly shaped the nature and patterns of functioning of these countries. If you look at the Bulgarian southern borders with Greece and Turkey, you need to be aware that there are still minefields between Bulgaria and Greece and between Bulgaria and Turkey that literally cannot be crossed. On the other hand, me as a child living in Bulgaria, I remember that there were 3 military units very close to the Bulgarian-Turkish border, that everyone knew that if you are sent at that time, the army was, the conscription was obligatory, so everybody knew that if you are sent to one of these units, you will really have a horrible term in the army. And the logic was that these three military units were supposed, in the case of a Cold War turning into hot war, to stop the Turkish army, just to remind you, the second largest army in NATO. And according to the Bulgarian military planning, 100% of the soldiers in these units would die. So you can imagine that if you would send to serve there, you would be trained to die. I mean, that was generally the logic. On the other hand, whereas the border with NATO was very strongly guarded, Yugoslavia was the window to the West, was the source of hope and escape. There are even very interesting documentaries about people who managed and tried and managed to escape to the West, recalling their histories, how they managed to cross the border with Yugoslavia, how they managed to either to trick or actually compassionately be treated by Bulgarian guards, being aware where these people are heading. But what is more interesting for the people in Bulgaria, Yugoslavia was the source of information about what happens in the world. So all the Bulgarians were installing huge antennas trying to capture Yugoslav TV. Children, we were trying to watch Tom and Jerry because Nu Pagadi was always on the agenda. But what is more important is that this logic, for example, also went through the Romanian-Bulgarian border. Whereas in Romania at that time, the Romanian TV was broadcasting only, if I'm not wrong, for 2 hours a day.
I heard the same. Yeah.
And Bulgarian TV was broadcasting the whole day. So all the Romanians that had access to this were trying to capture Bulgarian signal also to obtain certain information or at least entertainment. So this is just to show how on one hand the political borders played an important role and they literally determined the patterns of behavior, and on the other hand, how the social needs were even capable of trespassing and crossing these borders without the support of the communist authorities. I remember in particular the context of Tom and Jerry. I was 8 years old when I placed on our balcony 4-meter 10 antenna. My colleague who was 10 taught me how to connect it to the TV, and then it appeared, because Sofia is literally 40 kilometers in straight line from the Yugoslav border, that the Bulgarian authorities were very strongly interrupting this signal. So you could literally watch Tom and Jerry, but through a heavy snowfall. You barely could see the contours of these creatures, and we were sitting with our noses kind of stuck to the screen because that was better than watching the Bulgarian cartoons. Leaving that aside, of course, the end of the Cold War introduced profound changes, and they also had a huge impact on the region. Borders that were only formal before turned into tangible, real borders, as in the context between Serbia and Kosovo. But we also have all the countries of the Western Balkans at a certain point ended up with physical borders among people that disrupted these natural human processes. At the same time, new perspectives appeared. And here, in the context of the previous panel, and in the context of one of the discussions that we had during the coffee break, it is not that borders doesn't matter. They matter very importantly. They determine at national level the perspective of a center and periphery. But what is important, and we see that up until today, they profoundly shape the relations in the Balkans. However, what is new and what has appeared is the European Union perspective. This perspective was absolutely absent until the late 1990s. And the borders were sacrosanct, you could never touch them, never discuss them. You probably all know that one of the silent agreements among politicians concerning the Balkans is that no border changes should be made, because they know that the domino effect can lead to an immediate eruption of tensions in the region. And I think it is extremely important to learn. We see it up until today. We see the Bulgarian veto on North Macedonia. We see the temptation in the Croat-Serbian relations to use history. Needless to give other examples related to these matters. Slovenian-Croat in the context of their enlargement. All these issues, they are part of the political life. However, what the European Union brought is the model that allows to deprioritize these sacrosanct matters into matters of daily functioning. And when we talk about the question about Hungary and Ukraine, it is not that there are no interests that need to be protected and every single country has the right to do so. We were just literally over a month ago in Bulgaria, and the first thing that they were asking us is whether Poland can block Ukraine in the context of their European integration because of historical matters. And no matter how absurd that sounds, you see that the temptation to use this matter in internal Polish politics is quite strong. So in that sense, it's easy to say, no, it doesn't matter, but the temptation to use it for these short-term benefits is really high. At the same time, what appears as this essence is that for those countries that join the European Union and become part, and the Bulgarian and Romanian experience is significant because actually Schengen is really necessary between these two countries. Not even for the sake of the whole European Union, but for the sake of their own relations. And this is, I'm quoting here Vladimir's information, over 2 million Romanians pass through Bulgaria every single year to go to Greece. This is just to get an idea. Whole Bulgaria is 6 million, okay? So 1/3 goes through the country. On the other hand, whenever a country that is outside the EU, like Serbia, has any internal difficulties, it appears that the shortest way to the EU is through Romania. So we need this efficiency, these facilities. The countries that are in the EU still can use their interests and still can push forward their national agendas, but it is a matter of deprioritization of these tensions that forbid us from working together. And this is also a lesson that not only the Balkans should learn, but also Hungarians in the context of Ukraine.
Thank you very much for that. And actually, you answered my question, because my last question would be something like, what would be the cure for that problem? Because we see that this is not a question of geography. I mean, all those borders. This is the question of politics, the history, migration processes, not only the current, because we saw a lot of migrations in the Balkan region, like 19th century, 20th century. We know that. Yeah? So I would like to ask the same question other panelists. Do you think that European integration is enough to fix the problems the Balkan countries and people face right now? What's your opinion? Vladimir, please.
Can I start?
Yeah, sure.
First of all, let me just make a small correction, because I didn't communicate very clearly with Spasimir. So it's 2.1 million Romanians who were tourists in Bulgaria last year, but the number of travelers to Greece and Turkey and other places through Bulgaria, we cannot maybe multiply by 2 or maybe even 3. Romanians are really a very traveling nation, and Bulgaria is important for this reason, maybe also for them. You ask how, the way I understood the question is the EU presence or role enough for positive transformation to happen with regards to borders and identities. I think, of course, it's good that there is this idea of integration and synchronization of the countries in the region. It's very positive and promising idea. The thing is that, in my view, at least with regards to Bulgarian-Romanian relations, there is this issue that the proper dynamics of the societies, the proper internal drive for this synchronization, I think still is relatively low, and the majority or the general change happens through what our partners encourage us to do or guarantee for us doing. I said I could speak a little bit more about the evolution of the border. Maybe I could skip the fact that after the EU, there was a lot of acceleration of travels, for example, because traveling was much more easier. But the thing is that at the level of people, there is, I think, still some inertia. So, for example, we have now very good cooperation between Bulgaria and Romania in terms of security and defense. Of course, you can immediately understand that this is related also to the war in Ukraine. Bulgaria and Romania signed a strategic partnership agreement 1 year ago in March. So on political level, there are declarations, there are efforts that some new period in the relations takes place. But I have been arguing that this somehow goes against the general tendency which has existed for decades. I mean, the whole transition, there was certain indifference between the two countries and their people as well. So a lot of people just are formed and taught, socialized in a way that they don't really have any special curiosity or ambition or ability to cooperate with the other one again on the other side of the river. So for me, it's not enough that only, let's call it like that, some allies decide to cooperate and political will exists. For me, the people in our region are also a subject of any relations, and for any relations to have deeper impact and to really move on at a deeper level in society, there must be also involvement of the people. Now, for me, that means that there must be more either individuals or organizations in the Bulgarian-Romanian or any other relations in the region who have the trust of both sides. And it must be understood that this is not just meant that somebody accumulates some social capital and transform it into political or economic. I think there must be really understanding that the social capital in the periphery, as also Spasimir mentions that we should discuss, the social capital is at low level. That's, I think, one of the characteristics, at least in the type of periphery I observe. So if anyone wants to have greater, more ambitious, more advanced relations between Bulgaria, Romania or other country, there must be effort to increase the social capital, in other words, the trust. And here I think the people or the organizations who are some kind of bridge of friendship, if we use the name of the bridge next to Ruse Giurgiu, they could play really a positive role in this transformation. So for me, that is, let's say, the hopeful part of the story, that democracy, EU, theoretically is not only about taking power and imposing certain, let's say, general line, it's also about empowerment of the people.
Yeah, thank you. I do agree. Let me know, the floor is yours, please.
Yes. I will relate my comment to the colleague from Romania when he mentioned how, if I'm not wrong, Russia is using minority to create tensions. Unfortunately, this is the same issue with the Kosovo. Inspired by Russia, Serbia is using very much Serbian, we call, according to the constitution, non-major community, majority community, to create tensions. They became kind of, let's say, a fence for them to fully integrate in Kosovo society. Luckily, my institution, the university where I teach, it's a multi-ethnic university. 25% of staff and students are from non-majority community, including here Serbs. But the EU integration process yes, as I said in the beginning, EU Euro-Atlantic, or better to say Euro-Atlantic integration is the main mechanism to prevent Russia influence as well. However, European Union is the main donator in Western Balkans, including here Serbia. On the other side, we have just less than 300 kilometers from capital of Kosovo, or so-called Russian humanitarian center, which is, according to the State Department, it's a spy base basically. So I think it is needed to speed up with also EU integration process, because very often Western Balkan countries are considering that European Union is using double standards compared to the other regions that were integrated previously. It is necessary to use not just the carrot but also stick as well for Western Balkans countries who are not interested to embrace the Western values. And there is no other alternatives. Of course, mutual cooperation is mandatory. It's a pivotal role for future for long-lasting peace in the Western Balkans. Political dialogue is necessary. Mental border, like you mentioned, is mandatory in order to break down all the misunderstandings and stereotypes between parties in Western Balkans. We still don't know basically each other. Students from Kosovo, let's say, with the students from Serbia, mainly they don't know each other very well because of the propaganda, because of different stereotypes. I remember 7-8 years ago, I was coordinating a project, build bridges, not walls, the role of universities in peace building, and we received the students from Serbia, unfortunately not from Belgrade University, because they didn't want to cooperate in this consortium because of political reasons. When we received the students from Serbia, their first impression was like, guys, you are like us. And I said, what do you mean like us? I don't know, just like us, because we were told differently. So the role of all generation is hindering the collaboration and the cooperation between people in the Western Balkans. So this kind of narrative, the discourse, like the other parties in the former Yugoslavia are the second class, while we are the elites in the Western in the former Yugoslavia, and how it should still be, it is a wrong narrative, and we have to accept in Western Balkans as society, as the academicians, even on political level, to accept and recognize the reality. There is no way to go back, there is no Yugoslavia anymore.
Thank you. Sposimir, would you like to add something to that, please?
That would be like a concluding argument, as I understand, because
Yes.
but again, during the break, we briefly exchanged some thoughts, and Vladimir raised an argument that is extremely important, that it appeared in the context of our discussion about the popular attitudes towards borders and how they shape people's behavior, and they are a source of producing and reproducing of stereotypes and prejudices and perspectives. And then I thought for a second about something that shocked me a long time ago. When I was a student and I was living in Krakow, I loved to make bike tours around the city, and in the literally several kilometers outside of the city borders, there is a small creek. It's called Kluj Voda. And this creek, as a natural barrier, was the border between the Austrian and the Russian Empire. You can imagine that you cycle, and all of a sudden you see a sign telling you with the two coats of arms of the Austrian Empire and the Russian Empire, and you start wondering, where am I? And then you ask me, what needs to happen so that these changes? I'm very much terrified that my answer will be, first of all, very constructivist and anti-national. But apparently, the thing that changes the perspective of border is the disappearance of the political subject that makes it to endure. So if this is any conclusion that we can extract from this panel, it's not very positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I know that we are a little bit out of time, But do we have any questions from the audience, please? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. It's not actually a question, but I'd like to add a comment because I totally agree with Vladimir. His position about the relations between Romania and Bulgaria, it's right. But I think that also the perception between our people can influence the political cooperation and the political negotiations between our countries. And unfortunately, in Romania, the general perception over Bulgaria and Bulgarian people is that they are acting in favor of the Russian Federation just because they have a lot of instability or a lot of political instability, and because it's about Bulgarian position over the European security threats and so on. But also you should recognize that Romania lost at the end of the Second World War territory in favor of Bulgaria. And also in North Dobruja, I'm from Constanța County, and Vladimir knows very well that in my county, people really believe that the South Dobruja is still part of the Romanian territory. And regarding the bridges and our common borders, I should add that Romanians and the Romanian government see the Danube River as a natural barrier between the European civilization and the Russian factor civilization. And unfortunately, the Balkans are used, as I said, are used by the Russian Federation as a weapon against the European security and the European stability. And I don't know if Romania will decide to cooperate with Bulgaria for new bridges or for development develop its their common borders. But I think that Vladimir has right. The Russian-Ukrainian war, the Russian invasion in Ukraine, make us to realize the importance of political cooperation. Finally, we signed a bilateral treaty that recognize each other as vital partners. Thank you.
I don't think that it was a question, it was kind of a comment. So, do you need to add something? Like
I may answer, yes.
Yeah.
You know, I have been writing on Romanian issues, if I'm not mistaken, since 2009. So you can imagine that this qualification of Bulgaria as a Russian satellite, which has been formed under the Soviet or socialist era, I have come across it many times. And I have written articles also about that. I think the fact that Bulgaria is in the EU and NATO means something. So in my view, it's rather the Romanians who have still not developed the necessary sensitivities or notions to understand what has been going on to the south of Bulgaria in the uncivilized part of Europe, as you or somebody thinks. And part of my effort is also to provide some notions or doors to enter, study, understand, and maybe discover that Europe has many faces.
Thank you. Do we have any other question here? Yeah, okay, so let's, because we really have to finish the panel, so thank you very much indeed. I would like to thank to all of our panelists, so let's thank them. And